be recording. What you want to do when you're measuring out book cloth, which this is just cotton. Book cloth is a specific thing, but we're going to pretend like this is book cloth. It'll behave basically the same for our purposes. Is essentially make sure that first it is close to 100% cotton. If you get a polyester or something with a lot of stretch, it's actually going to work against you. Cotton has the right amount of stretch where it can open and close, but it doesn't stretch too far so that when you're gluing it down, it gets all porous basically and stretched out. So it still has some structure to it.
So this is just one of those like bandana cloths they sell? Like
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if you have like a larger book, you might want to get a bigger thing. I just really like this fabric, so I bought a bigger one. But think about what kind of fabric you want to use. This I literally picked up at Walmart 20 minutes ago. But think about that in what you're bringing onto your surface. When I say that, I mean try to avoid things that aren't porous at all. So things like leather are not going to work. You're going to have like a completely different set of adhesives to get that to actually adhere, and it still might come off as it opens and closes. So again, cotton is the best material for this. And you want to make sure that you're measuring your material with the book flat relatively towards the center, right? And you want to give it at least 3/4 of an inch on every side, should be fine. 1/2 inch is what a lot of people will tell you to do, and they're not wrong necessarily, but I think for your first book, 3/4 of an inch is probably your best bet. I'm using a Sharpie because I have black fabric, so I'm not too concerned about it bleeding through, but you might be. It's okay if it's not perfect, right? And you'll see why kind of as we go in every single area. But it is a good idea if you try and get it relatively regular so that it looks intentional when you're done. Okay. So, I'm also going to do it this way. I'm just going to make one line across here. I don't need it to go the full length, I just need to know where to cut. And okay, I'm going to guesstimate the top, just for the sake of time. But you'll kind of cut it out from there. You want to try and get it relatively consistent, but don't worry too much about little hairs like this. If you do have them, you don't have to actively avoid them because you'll end up covering them up with paper later on anyway. Or you could also cover them up with fabric if you wanted to. I think I'm going to leave all of that at the top and just try to even it out a little. You could try using the rotary cutters for this. They're currently sharp enough to cut cotton, but over time they're going to get duller and duller. So scissors are probably the way to go. The machined edge, so I'm just going to leave it like that. So once you get the size you need, you want to kind of lay it down. Think about where you're going to put it. You want to have an even amount on the top and the bottom, okay? Relatively even, it doesn't have to be perfect, because as you kind of fold into, right, you want it to look relatively intentional and consistent. Okay. So I'm going to move the book. I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to lay it like this. Okay. The first place that you want to start adhering your fabric is the spine. So you want to start center and move outward, right? So I picked for most of the books a really nice kind of canvas-like material, right? Book cloth is really what it is. If you have something that's a little more slick than this, and feel free to touch it, right? If you have something more slick than this, you might need to sandpaper it a little, which I brought some sandpaper for that, just to rough up the surface so that that glue actually sticks, and to give it some pores to hang out in. So you'll want to, again, start with the spine. And a relatively even, fairly copious amount of glue. And you're going to kind of lay this down. You want to think about how you want to orient it. And before you really stick it, make sure that you have the right length and that it's on relatively straight. And then you'll kind of smooth that out with your hand first. And you see how there's a little bit of glue coming through. Don't stress out about that. This glue dries clear, right? So that's why we're using it. So if you get a little bit of that, it's not the end of the world. If you get like a lot of it, you might want to dab some of it up with like a paper towel or something so you don't get weird texture on the outside. And I'm going to use a bamboo folder to just kind of smooth that out as much as I can to make sure that it's all the way on there. And then I'm going to start on one side. Don't pull it up off of what you just glued. I'm going to glue it into this kind of crevice here. So with my book, I'm going to have to open it a little to do that, to make sure that it actually goes in, because it's old enough that it's going to need that assistance. But this will be my next place to go. If you have any stickers on your cover, try and get them off. If they don't come off perfectly, it's not the end of the world. They're not so slick that they won't glue in, right? Put the glue on it here. And you'll want to make sure that you get this cloth into those seams, right? Nice and even. And then for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and close it. And I'm going to glue this front part. You really should do both sides of the seam first, then glue the front covers, right? But then you'd be standing here looking at me forever. Again, make sure you glue really well. If you're a particularly reckless gluer, you might want to put down some wax paper before the pages. It's up to you. You know your gluing style. There are some people I've seen that I'm like, no, that's interesting. What you're doing there. One of them is the example video, which I haven't uploaded yet, but there's a video of a lady and she just goes with her glue straight from the bottle and doesn't even smooth it out, which is a choice that she's making for sure.
Horizontal page.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, she'll just, and then she just lets it smooth out, quote unquote. Okay. So you want to move relatively quickly with this, and you want to make sure you're smoothing all the way out. Oh, that might be a little short, but I'm not too stressed about that in this case. If you find yourself with not very much space at the edge, you might want to start again. I'm not going to do that because we're in a rush. A relative rush.
So we're presenting on Tuesday?
Theoretically, yes. I'm going to check back in with you today, though, and make sure that that's not terrifying for you. And we should have enough on this side, so we'll demo with this side. So I'm just going to glue inside of this seam again. You can do this with it laying down, but again, I would suggest you do it with it kind of tented up so that you get an idea of how this fold is going to interact, and so that it already has like a pre-stretched position to it. Yeah, she has one of those glue bottles that has like a needle attached to it, and she'll just go for it. And I go, that's a choice. It works most of the time, although once in a while she'll say, "Oh, but this didn't go the way I wanted to," and I'll go, "What a surprise!" But as far as gluing book covers on, she does a pretty good job. So. I will also say a lot of people come to this practice of not just altered books, but bookmaking in a self-taught way, where they learn from books, or they learn from videos, and so they'll pick up the bad habits of that self-taught kind of tradition, where somebody just doesn't think to tell them in a video that they shouldn't be doing this or that or the other, or that it's a better idea to do. To smooth out your glue, right? So, I might be judging, but I'm judging with kindness. Because I also came to this through a self-taught means initially, but a little bit under the tutelage of my professor at the time. Although he was like, "I'm not good at this, I don't know." So that was kind of funny. But again, you want to kind of smooth this out. Make sure you don't have any air bubbles in it. And since this side came out a little better than the other, right? Since this side came out with a little bit more lead to it, we're going to use it for our example. So, I'm just going to go ahead and open it straight out to kind of show you what I'm doing. What you want to do when you are working with these is kind of cut off a rounded corner, right? Because you don't need this. We're not wrapping it like a present, right? We're wrapping it so that it all fits. And this is exactly how you can kind of see the book cloth being wrapped in the same way underneath this paper, which also gives you a preview to what we're going to do next. And I'm just going to snip it a little bit. You do want to have a little bit of an overhang here so that you can cover up any paper that's underneath it, or the board when we work later. And you'll essentially end up folding it bottom and then top into that corner, right? But of course you need to do it one at a time. So you'll go ahead and cut all of your, I'm going to do it this way. If you make a mistake with the cut, just don't continue. So, we're going to ignore that side. But this is what you'll do for all four corners. Okay. And then you will, and again, this lady in the video just like pours glue on it, which is wild with her. But, you know, you're going to glue the cloth, not the board. Okay, because you don't want to have any excess here. Ooh, I forgot one other cut that you need to do. So you also want to cut right here, directly to where that fold is. Okay, and you'll do that on both corners here and on both sides. And I'll show you what we do with that part later. I'm gonna re-glue this because it's probably drying out. And with this, because you're gluing something porous, you don't want to glue like a ton, just a reasonable amount of glue. And then you'll fold it over. Try not to stretch it too much if it is a stretchy fabric. If you get a little bit of curling, is what I had right here, I just use my nails to force it into position. And you want it to kind of go into this seam a little bit. Just a little bit, not so much that it's overhanging onto the paper, but enough that it seems intentional, right? And I'm going to add a tiny bit of glue there because it's not glued enough. Again, add the glue to the fabric, not the board. Okay. And you'll smooth it out. I've got another corner, but I'm not stressed about that because it's going to get folded over anyway. Then you'll add glue right here. For this part, it's a good idea to either glue on one of these cutting mats so you can clean it, or to glue on some newsprint, because this is probably the messiest part of this process. Did I not cut this? I'm sure it's not. So you want to do your top and bottom first. I'm doing a speed run version of this, but you'll want to do it kind of calmly. Top and bottom, and then the side gets folded over. And again, don't be too worried about this kind of uneven edge. It's not worth being distressed about. Okay. But you do want these kind of peaky little corners. Okay. You can cover those with book corners if you wanted to, right? But you don't have to. You can make your own book corners as well if you'd like to. Yeah. Yeah, you kind of have to buy them at specialty shops now too, which is weird. But especially because they protect books, like, what's the point of them?
Leather shop in Albuquerque.
Ooh.
Too.
Yeah.
Wilson's? No, what is it? Tandy Leather.
I've
Tandy
never
Leather
been.
is still a thing, and they have those corners because people like to make the leather bound books and stuff, and they'll put those metal corners or, yeah, I've seen those before.
So, if you make a mistake, and I'm going to put a little sheet of wax paper here because I don't want it to get glued to the back. This is still wet. But if you make a mistake on one side, there are ways to repair it. So don't stress out too much. No. Calm down. No.
Haven't even done it.
So I'm just going to do that so that I can flip it. So if you mess up in a way like this, don't worry too much. You can peel it up as long as that glue is still wet, and I'm using my fingernail. It might look like I'm doing nothing, but I am actually using my fingernail to get under there wherever I can. And it won't be the prettiest solution, but I'm just going to add a little strip of fabric here, which thankfully I have a bunch of. We're going to go with this one. Yeah, we're going to go with this one. So, to do that, again, you would glue the fabric first. And then the glue will permeate through this particular fabric, so I'm not going to try and glue this fabric and this fabric because it'll be unnecessary amounts of glue. Right. And I'm not going to do all of this strip because I do think I need to trim it to be the same length, but I also don't want to do all of it right now. So you'll lift that. I'm going to close this to make it easier. And you'll wish you were an octopus a little bit while you do this, but
Do you want to rest your hand?
yeah, if you wouldn't mind holding this peel back. Thank you, Sierra. So if anybody asks you for help with this, you help them. But essentially you kind of, yeah, I was trying. The squirrel, I don't know what it's doing, it's upside down. But thank you. But you kind of want to attach these, right? And you'll note that there's like a little bit of a bump that's going to happen here. I'm not distressed about it. If you have to do it, I won't be like, how dare you repair the book. Or notice a mistake and then try and fix it, right? But you might need to add a little bit more glue. All of my glue kind of dried as I was moving. And again, don't worry too much about it's drying. It should dry clear. You can also do this on the outside if you don't mind having a little runner strip, but I personally don't like those. That doesn't mean that you can't do them just because I don't like them. But if you wanted to say, okay, well, I have some ribbon, so I can make it look intentional, go for it, right? And I'm gonna fold this a little bit around here. I might need to glue a little bit more because I'm having some flappiness right here, but I'm going to come back to it because it's going to take time, and I'd rather move on with the demo. So if you do it this way, because you have some kind of mistake that you've made, make sure you still cut your little shapes just out of both pieces of fabric. Try and keep them lined up. Try not to move them around too much. And then you're going to do the same thing here. And the top. And then once I'm done with this part, I'm going to let it dry. And then I'll show you how to put this paper into it. You could probably guess already, but I'll show you anyway. I'm going to open this a little. If that helps me. Not a ton of glue there, but I also am going to trim this. This is when I would say it's a little bit too far of an overhang. This is when it's like starting to touch the other piece of paper. I'm sure this is the most riveting thing to happen.
It's a close tie for me. Getting the fabric super messed up, trying to put a pocket in.
I'll take
It's
a
very
look.
stretchy fabric. I might have to redo the pocket.
What kind of fabric is it?
T-shirt that lays really poorly.
Mm.
So like not inherently, I don't think too much of an issue. It's just a matter of like actually cutting it. It was like a parallelogram.
Gotcha.
So definitely gonna be better to do like line cutter.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. You solved your own problems.
Just don't have the tools I don't to do so.
So, again, you'll just, I'm actually going to dump that in there for now. Fold that over. And these corners are a little uglier, so I'm going to tuck them in a bit and hold them down so that I can cover up that little seam. I'm going to do that here as well. And again, I'm going to go back into this and finish gluing that down to make it look a little nicer, a little more intentional. The last thing that I'm going to show you when it comes to your fabric is how to essentially cover this little strip, right? The side that's near the headband. So we're going to stand our book up. I'm not going to close it because I don't want to. I'm going to slightly close it and not all the way. And in fact, maybe it would be better if I close it this way. Just for the sake of you being able to see. So again, this is part of why we choose books that have a loose headband, because what I'm going to do is glue this and then shove it back here. Okay. So, fingers crossed. Maybe it's easier to see it here. No, it's easier to see it here.
Is the cover required?
It doesn't have to be fabric, so it can be painted, which we'll also talk about, but I'm not going to show you because I only have one. And I'm sure you're okay, you can totally paint it. And I'll put up a video for painting it as well, or maybe we'll, yeah, I'll put it up. I was going to say maybe we'll watch it, but that would be weird. It'd be a weird use of class time. So, the reason I rinsed that, even though it was inconvenient to me and you and everybody in the room, is it was starting to get crispy, and you don't want a bunch of boogers in your glue, especially when it comes to your cover. It's a little less important when you're doing your pages because you're just kind of gluing them together to adhere them, but this needs to be relatively physically, visually appealing. So what I'm going to do is just shove my bone folder in here really quick to loosen it, and then I'm going to start shoving the fabric in there. You can make your fabric a little shorter if you want to than mine. It'll be easier to shove in, right? But you want to basically just make sure it really gets in there. Okay? Cool.
Yes, very cool.
Okay. Thanks. I invented it. I'm just kidding. And then you might have like little strays that you want to trim. Ooh, don't throw your your scissors at yourself
That's just too nice.
either. It's true. It is two knives with a hinge. If you wanted to, you could go ahead and do the other side. My other side is actually kind of tighter, which is interesting. It's probably from the modifications I've made. So I would shove it really in there and loosen it up before you even start gluing. And that would be how you change out a cover. With cloth, anyway. So for those of you who are planning on painting yours, how many people are planning on painting yours? 1, 2? Okay, and I think Jeff said he might be as well. So what I'm going to do for you all is I bought some, there it is, some gesso. And you can use that gesso. Oh, you really got to get in there and be vigorous. Vigorous but consistent.
It could also be the security device holding it together.
It could be. Yeah, it's the librarians. No, just kidding.
It is. So
Um,
these hardbacks, we put that security device right inside the spine, so it sometimes uses that spine a little bit together.
Gotcha.
Not much.
Security is in like structural
When it-
integrity or like literally not stealing the book?
Literally not stealing the book.
That's
the
what
security
beats
device.
the,
Yeah.
What do they look like? Is it just
Let's rip this
You should
open.
tell us all the
Do
details.
you have an extra one?
I don't. Oh, actually, I do.
We can rip it open.
In over there, I have one of those, and that red one on top is not good for altering, so we can wreck that one and look at it. Just so you know, if you do get a little bit of glue here, make sure you wipe it off, okay? Otherwise you'll end up with a book niche effect and your pages won't open well. But yeah, the end.